welcome to Books with Lexi. In this video, I'm going to be reading 3 2022 release horror books that I didn't get to but still really want to. So I'm really big into reading new releases, and there are a few that were published in 2022 that I didn't get to quite in time, either because I was waiting for the library hold to come in, either physically or from Libby, or I didn't hear about them until a little bit later and ran out of time in the year. So I'm really excited to be reading these now. The 3 books I will be reading are Loot by Jennifer Thorne, Malice House by Megan Shepherd, and The Holocind by Andy Davidson. I really think all 3 of these books have a lot of potential, and I'm so excited for them. So let's get into the vlog. So I don't really ever do this, but I am finished with Loot. I did the 24-hour read along, and this was due the next day, like 4 in the afternoon. So I woke up and I just listened to the whole thing, and I finished with like 30 minutes left. So thankfully it was short. So Loot is an island, and we are following our main character, Nina. She's new to Loot. She became a lady of Loot after marrying Lord Treadway, and his family protects the island, so they're in charge of things. The people on Loot, they're blessed with good weather, good health. There is an ongoing war, and none of the citizens of Loot have died in it. So the catch with this whole thing is that every 7 years there has to be sacrifices made to the island to continue this. So for me, I'm gonna give this 2 stars because it was really boring in my opinion. The pacing didn't work for me, so none of the exciting things happened until 40% in. So we're starting 3 days before, and then we get 2 days before, 1 day before, and then around 40%, that's when we start the event of like the day that things happen. It is very, very slow leading up to that point. And by that point, I just really didn't care that much. This is pitched as folk horror, and like I get that, but at the same time, I just like didn't feel any sense of dread or suspense or any like feelings that are horror related. There were like horrific things happening once we got a bit into this, but honestly, it just took too long. And the combination of pacing and not caring about the characters, like, just led this to be a very boring read for me. So yeah, this just did not work for me. I don't think it was bad, but for my reading taste, I thought it was really boring. So I am going to go 2 stars. Sorry I didn't vlog, but if you are interested in this and like slower stories, I would still recommend it. Hello, I have started Malice House. I almost said Ninth House. Anyway, this is so interesting so far. So this is a horror thriller blend, which I am really, really loving, and it is done in a way that it is feeling like both throughout the whole book instead of one for part of the book and then switching to the other genre. And that's my favorite way to blend the genres together instead of it feeling like 2 separate halves. Okay, so we are following our main character. Please hold while I look up her name. Haven, and her father has just passed away. Her father was a writer, and he lived in a town in Maine or Oregon, I don't know, some coastal town. So her father was a horror writer. He was like super famous, published, and he lived by himself in this large house on a cliff. And her father, before he passed, struggled with dementia. So a lot of the things that he said before he passed, like, nobody is sure if they are real or not. So she gets there and she's trying to decide what to do with the house, if she wants to sell it, what to do with some of his stuff, if she wants to keep that, sell some of that. And she ends up finding these secret handwritten manuscripts by her father. They have not been published, and it's a collection of like horror short stories that he wrote. And she is a struggling artist. She's just divorced, and she decides that she's going to illustrate the manuscript and publish that way to like kind of get her big break. It'll be a father-daughter collab, all this stuff. There's also been some things going on in the house and in the town. The house has like whispers of being haunted, and she has been hearing some like noises and all of this stuff. There's been some bad things happening in the town. There's been some deaths. Also, she told a couple people about this manuscript, like her father's writing or reading group or whatever. It might have been a book club, and they are like obsessively trying to get this from her now. So there's that. There's a neighbor that we don't know what he's up to. There's another character that like seems like she's her friend, but you never know because this is a horror thriller. There's a lot of super interesting stuff going on. There's some possibly otherworldly things happening in this book. It is super interesting. I'm really liking how these different storylines are all tied together. I'm 40% in and I'm having a really great time with this. I'm liking the writing. I believe this is Megan Shepherd's adult debut. She has some YA stuff. I'm not sure. I'm assuming horror and thriller. I don't know the answer after looking at the dust jacket. I'm liking the writing. It's very easy to read. It's not anything that's like blowing my mind, but I don't really want that. Sorry, Bowser's eating. Yeah, the plot is super interesting, and this feels like the kind of horror thriller that I want it to be. At this point, I would say it is leaning more thriller than horror, but it's still a good mix, and I'm very happy with this. So since I'm 40% in, I don't know if I will update you again while I'm reading or at the end. If something like that I really want to talk to you about comes up, I will definitely come back. But yeah, so far, so good. I can see this being one of my favorite books I've read so far this year, which is always great. So I'm gonna go read. I'll talk to you later. Something happened. What? This book? I'm very much enjoying it. I will say it definitely feels more like a thriller with horror elements. I know I said that earlier, but like that really is true. The horror stuff in here is like horror, but it's not like scary, you know? Like it's written like it's a thriller, if that makes any sense. I hope it does because I want the correct audience to pick this up. But there was a thing that just happened and I'm like shocked. There's been some plot twists in here, which, like, yes, maybe if I sat down and tried to figure things out, I would get it. But, like, oh my gosh. This is very good. I cannot wait to finish. So I have finished Malice House, and I really, really like this one. This one I'm going to give 5 stars. It's not an all-time favorite 5-star, but I had such a fun time with it. I really liked the concept of it, and I really loved the direction it went in. Like, I thought it was so much fun. I personally really like whenever horror books lean towards dark fantasy, and that's definitely what this one does. Megan Shepherd, this is her adult debut, but she has written a lot of YA fantasy. I don't know if it's horror fantasy, but fantasy in the past. So you can definitely see the influence on that in here. And I personally loved it. I know a lot of people don't because of the same reasons that I loved it. This is unrealistic. It is weird, but I just personally really love those things. I just think it was such a fun concept. And I do think that like things got a tiny bit confusing towards the end. I don't think it was a perfect ending. I do think if the ending was done just a little bit differently, this could have been like a 5-star, like all-time favorite book because I had such a good time reading this. To me, it read like a thriller with like a mystery element towards the beginning, and then it adds in horror elements and then goes towards dark fantasy. I personally obviously love thriller and horror, and I do really like horror that has fantasy elements in it because usually those are the books that people describe as weird, and I like weird things. This felt very unique to me, and I am always looking for books that are like kind of strange and not the typical thing that people write. So if someone calls a book weird, I will likely pick it up, and this one worked so well for me. I'm interested in trying Megan Shepherd's fantasy, but I 100% will continue to read her if she is going in this horror thriller kind of fantasy direction. So this was great. One of my favorite books of the year so far by far, and I highly recommend it to anyone that likes weird and is okay with some fantasy elements in their horror. I am a third into The Holocind by Andy Davidson. So this one, it's very long. So I will tell you the synopsis of this and then I will get into some thoughts about it. So the most present day storyline is taking place in, I believe, 1989. Yes. So in 1989, we are following Nellie. She is with her like 11-year-old son and she is escaping an abusive husband. She finds out that her great grandfather, long lost grandfather, has willed her his house. He has recently passed away. So she finds this out and packs a bag to leave her abusive husband. So So the house that she is willed is a very run-down farmhouse in Georgia. So they get to this house and it is gross. There's like scratching in the walls. There's whispers at night. The forest that they live in is very quiet. When they first get there, there's like a bear in the middle of the road, so they have to leave their car, and then they end up like going back to get it, and the bear is not there anymore. I just brought that up because there's a bear on the cover here. So Nellie either is not picking up on these like weird things at the house, or she's choosing to ignore it because she is looking for a fresh start. But her son is picking up on a lot of these things while they are unpacking and cleaning and stuff. So that is a storyline that is in the synopsis. This is a very cool, it's from the library, so I can't show you the whole thing. But there's a map in here of the grounds that Nellie now lives on and that her family in the past has owned. There are some fun things in here, like this page. I actually would recommend either reading this physically or having the physical book to follow along with if you're listening to the audiobook. With the audiobook solely, it's very, very easy to get confused. So it tells us the timeline we're in. So it'll say June 30th, 1989, and we get some perspectives from her. And then there's a page break and it will shift to something related but in the past. So we are getting the 1989 storyline. And then we are also getting her great grandfather in 1918. And then we also end up getting something in like 1975. And it's just a lot to follow and keep up with. We are following Nellie, and then we are also in the present following this other guy who wants her land. He feels like he's owed it because he worked there or someone in his family worked there, and he's like this angry man, and I don't really understand why he's there. But I just think that too much is going on. I by far think that the present day storyline, present day, is the most interesting. It's the only one that I care about. The prologue is the only reason I'm somewhat interested in her grandfather's storyline, and it is, I'm assuming, explaining what is happening in the creepy stuff in the present storyline. And there are moments that I'm really liking, but generally I think the pacing is off. It's very, very slow. And I guess it's not in a way that's bothering me, but there are things that definitely could be cut out. Like, this book does not need to be 400 and something pages. Like, in my opinion, horror does not need to be this long, especially because a lot of it is not really building up the suspense or the tension or anything. So right now it is feeling like a 3-star book. Maybe it could end up being 4, but at this point I don't foresee it ending up being 5 stars. I don't have any issues with like the writing style specifically, but I just want things to pick up. So I just got to part 3, which is 37% in. Honestly, I don't know if you can see, there's a big chunk coming up next, so I'll probably talk to you at the end of that next, because that just makes the most sense. So I will see you then. I am 70% into the holocind, and honestly, I am quite bored. This is my fault. Whenever I started it, I didn't realize it was literary horror, and it most definitely is that. There's some interesting concepts, but like, it's too long for me and it's too slow, and like barely anything of interest has happened. Hello, Bowser. Adorable. So yeah, I think part of it is like the whole thing is historical too. The present day timeline is set in 89, I believe. Um, so I don't know. I probably never told you what this is about because like, I don't know. It says it's a terrifying novel about legacy and the nightmares hidden in family histories. Twisted tale of cosmic horror mixed with a stunning southern gothic fable that will haunt you long after you turn the final page. I feel like a lot of the cosmic horror hasn't happened yet, and I feel like once that kicks in, maybe I will be more interested. But right now, I'm just really mostly bored. I don't really care about anything that's happening in the past. I'm more interested in the present day stuff. And like, obviously, I know it ties together because they're related and it's the same like property and stuff. But I'm mostly bored. So those are my thoughts. I will finish. Hopefully, I will report back with better thoughts. But this is leaning between 2 and 3 stars right now. I have finished the holocind, and I am going to give this 3 stars, like a low 3. The thing is, for me, this was extremely too long. It did not need to be this long. There were a lot of interesting things that happened towards the end. Like, I really liked the end. That was probably like 4 stars. But I was so bored throughout this. It took me so long to read it, and I was finding that I didn't really ever want to pick it up. So like most of the book was 2 stars for me, and then the ending is what made it 3 stars. It gets weird at the end, which I always love. The inside flap does say that this is cosmic horror, but that's not throughout the whole book really. And that is why I liked the end, because it was cosmic horror. But I think a lot of this honestly was just incredibly dull and boring. So 3 stars feels kind of generous. It's probably more like 2.5. So it's kind of sad because I had another 2 star. You know, if Loot got 2 stars, this has to get 2 stars. Okay, yeah. So Loot and the Holokind both got 2 stars for me. Both because they were boring. That's really it. And the Malice House was 5 stars. So that wraps up my reading vlog, reading some 2022 horror books that I missed out on. I'd love to know what your favorite 2022 releases were. I tend to prioritize newer books, but I feel like that also still includes books from last year. So I'm always looking for more recommendations. I think that Loot and the Holokind are ones that you should try out if you are interested in them. They weren't for me. I thought they were both boring, but that's not necessarily going to be the case for everyone. And Malice House, I really loved. I do think the ending had some issues, but for me, 5 stars, one of my favorite books I've read this year, and I would really recommend it if you are looking for horror that has fantasy elements or gets kind of weird. If you've made it to the end and want to leave me an emoji, is there a bear emoji? I feel like there has to be a bear emoji. So leave me a bear emoji. If not, leave me a house emoji for Malice House. Honestly, either one is great. If you're looking to find me in other places on the internet, everything is linked in the description, including my Bookstagram, my Storygraph, and my Patreon. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye!